Today we will be discussing about pathophysiology of jaundice. Pathophysiology of jaundice. How do you define jaundice? Yes, please. What's your concept of jaundice? It's a yellow discoloration of eyes. For example, if someone is taking lot of carrots and lot of beta carotene has gone to the body and some tissue turns yellow, is that jaundice? That is not jaundice. Just increase in bilirubin level is not jaundice, because sometimes bilirubin level goes slightly above the normal level and we say there is hyperbilirubinemia, but if it does not impart the yellow color in skin or mucous membrane or interstitial fluid or sclera, we don't call that jaundice. So I think before you tell me new definitions, I must tell you what is jaundice. There are three terms which you should be clear. Number one, jaundice. Another term is hyperbilirubinemia. Then there is jaundice. Then there is another term is icterus. Then another term is cholestasis. These are terms which should be differentiated from each other. First of all, we must know that bilirubin is produced mainly during the breakdown of RBCs and other hemoproteins, and bilirubin is highly toxic molecule, and because bilirubin is constantly being produced in our body whenever RBCs are breaking down and whenever hemoproteins are breaking down, these toxic molecules, because they are daily produced about 0.2 to 0.3 grams per day, so this bilirubin should be pushed out of the body. Body should have very, very efficient mechanism to get rid of bilirubin. But if bilirubin levels go above normal in the body, first of all you should know what is the normal level of bilirubin. What is the normal level of bilirubin? Yeah, 0.2 to some people 1.2 milligram per dl. Some people take it up to 1.6. Anyway, if we say this is the normal level of bilirubin, 0.2 to 1.2 milligram per dl, right? And if your level go above that, we say there is hyperbilirubinemia. So how do we define hyperbilirubinemia? That bilirubin level in the body is more than normal levels. Is that right? Now, actually what really happens, look here, this is normal bilirubin level range, right? 0.2 to 1.2. If someone bilirubin level goes up to this level, is not going to develop yellow coloration of skin or sclera or the mucous membrane or interstitial fluid. Actually, significant concentration of bilirubin should be there so that enough yellow coloration of the body tissues occur so that it can be appreciated by the eyes of the examiner. Usually it happens when bilirubin level is somewhere around 2.5 milligram per dl. When bilirubin level, when it is going up, when it reaches around 2.5 milligram per dl, then what really happens, that observer can identify the presence of high bilirubin level. Is that right? And how the observer decides? Because patient shows that there is yellow coloration of or discoloration of the skin and mucous membranes and sclera. And when you have especially skin and mucous membrane with yellow coloration due to hyperbilirubinemia, we call the condition jaundice. So what is jaundice? Jaundice is yellow discoloration of the skin, mucous membrane and interstitial fluids, right, due to, and sclera, due to hyperbilirubinemia, right? It means every hyperbilirubinemia is not jaundice. Very mild hyperbilirubinemia is not jaundice, right? Hyperbilirubinemia should be up to a level that observing people are able to, you can say, appreciate the yellow coloration of the skin or the mucous membrane or the sclera or the interstitial fluid, then we say jaundice is there. Is that right? Another important thing is, what is icterus? Icterus is the term which is used when, especially due to hyperbilirubinemia, sclera turns yellow. When we say I can detect the icterus in this patient, it means the person is specifically referring to yellow discoloration of sclera. Is that right? Again, what is icterus? Icterus is yellow coloration of sclera due to hyperbilirubinemia. Remember that sclera shows the yellow coloration very easily as compared to the rest of the body tissues. The reason being, number one, sclera is white, so faint yellow color can be appreciated. Secondly, it's a scleral certain connective tissue molecules, they love to bind the bilirubin. Due to these two reasons, what really happens, that icterus is usually appreciable before the full-blown jaundice develops all over the body. If you are really watching your patient, you can say examining your patient serially, right? Again, I will repeat. What is hyperbilirubinemia? When your bilirubin level is more than normal. What is jaundice? When hyperbilirubinemia leads to yellow coloration of skin, mucous membrane, sclera and interstitial fluids. Right? What is icterus? When we are specifically referring to yellow coloration of sclera due to hyperbilirubinemia. Due to hyperbilirubinemia. Because if there is yellow coloration of body tissue due to some other reason, that should not be considered jaundice. Then another thing which is there is what is cholestasis. Yes. Have you heard of this term? Cholestasis? What is cholestasis? Yes, please. Dr. Kashif, what is cholestasis?
When bile flow stops due to
Right, he is very right. Actually, what he is talking about, that there is impaired bile outflow. Right, he is right. Under these circumstances, not only bilirubin spills over into blood, but other content of bile may also spill into blood. You know, bile has many contents, but three most important contents of the bile you should never forget. And what are those? Three most important contents of the bile. There is bilirubin, the bile acids or salt, right? And what is the third component of it? Yes, please. Cholesterol. Right? Now, when we say this hyperbilirubinemia, it means we are specifically talking about increased concentration of bilirubin. We are not commenting on level of cholesterol or level of bile acids or bile salt. But sometimes what happens, that bile outflow from hepatocytes or from the bile ducts stops. Right? And all these substances regurgitate into blood. So, if someone has raised level of bilirubin, along with that bile salts and acids, and along with that cholesterol, all of these substances are raised into blood, then we say person is suffering with cholestasis. What is cholestasis? Cholestasis is that there is impairment of bile outflow. Of course, you know, bile is formed from the hepatocytes and thrown into intrahepatic biliary canaliculi, and from there it goes to the extrahepatic biliary drainage system. You must be knowing there is right hepatic duct and there is left hepatic duct. They fuse together to make common hepatic duct. Then there is gallbladder cystic duct, and then there is common bile duct, which fuses with the pancreatic duct in most of the patient. Is that right? And opens at the duodenum at ampulla of Vater. Is that right? Now, if there is problem with that system, let me draw the diagram. Let's suppose that here is your liver, right? Hypothetically, if these are your hepatocytes and these are biliary canalicular system, these are biliary canalicular system, Of course, you must be knowing that here is your yes pancreas. Now, what really we see there? What we really see there, right? These are considered this point number 1, intrahepatic biliary canaliculi. Point number 1 is intrahepatic biliary canaliculi, right? Then, of course, you can say from both sides, this is right hepatic duct, and what is it? Left hepatic duct. And right and left hepatic duct, they fuse together to make what? Common hepatic duct. And what is this fusing with the common hepatic duct? Cystic duct. And then common hepatic duct and cystic duct, when they fuse together, they make, what is this? Common bile duct. And common bile duct fuses with which other duct? Pancreatic duct. So pancreatic juices and bile both can come out from this particular orifice. What is this? Ample of Vater, and surrounded by sphincter of Oddi. This is called bile outflow system, right? If there is obstruction with this bile outflow system at any level, then whatever bile was draining through this to the GIT, their drainage will be impaired, and this bile will be regurgitated into circulation. And when this bile will be regurgitated into circulation, what really happens? We say not only bilirubin will go to circulation, but along with bilirubin, bile acids will go to circulation, even cholesterol will also go to circulation, right? And we call this condition cholestasis. Is that right? But sometimes what happens, problem is, let's suppose at this level, that bilirubin cannot be conjugated, and unconjugated bilirubin go high in the blood. Under these circumstances, bile acids are drained well, right? And cholesterol is drained well. So only unconjugated bilirubin goes high in the blood. This kind of hyperbilirubinemia should not be called cholestasis, right? Now, if you really want to have a good concept about the jaundice, first you should understand the normal physiology of bilirubin, that how bilirubin is produced in the body, why bilirubin should be thrown out of the body, how bilirubin is carried in circulation, how it is dealt with by the liver, and in which form it appears into fecal matter, and in which form it appears in urinary system, right? So right now we shall talk about normal physiology of bilirubin. After that we'll talk about the causes of hyperbilirubinemia or causes of jaundice, right? Let's suppose here is your spleen. You know, the major source of bilirubin is from where? Breakdown of hemoglobin. Is that right? Hemoglobin and other heme protein like cytochrome and other enzymes, when they break down, right, they may release bilirubin. Now, let's suppose we talk about one RBC. You know, when RBCs, normally they are constantly being produced by the bone marrow. They are going to circulation. Then when they become, you can say, around 120 days old, right, they lose their plasticity and they get stuck into some narrow spaces in circulation like cords of Billroth in spleen. In the spleen there are some very narrow and tortuous points in which RBCs which are old, right, and which are not pliable RBCs, because fresh RBC is smart and pliable like fresh people, you know, like adolescents. But as you become old, you develop osteoarthritis and you also develop some degree of stiffness in your body and your mind even sometimes, unfortunately. Same is true about RBC. When RBCs, you know, RBC doesn't have a nucleus. Because RBC doesn't have a nucleus, so what really happens with RBC, when time passes by, RBC's proteins undergo denaturation. But because it doesn't have a nucleus, can it resynthesize new proteins? It cannot. It has kicked out its genetic machinery. So when its proteins become, you can say, denatured with the time and less functional with the time, then capability of RBCs to be pliable and twist and turn through the narrow capillaries is lost. That is the time for RBCs to get lost. That RBCs will get stuck into some narrow points. Most commonly in the spleen there are some very narrow circulatory points which are really test point for RBCs. We call them cords of Billroth. When a fresh RBC passes through that will twist and turn and move out, right? But if an old RBC comes, it will get stuck over there. And when RBC will get stuck into those narrow points in spleen or in some other points in bone marrow or in liver, then what really happens, that neighboring macrophages come into action and they eat up the RBCs. Because if RBCs go and stuck into spleen, do you think they should remain stuck there forever? Answer is no. So when RBCs get stuck over there, it activates the neighboring macrophages, and these macrophages basically phagocytose those RBCs. It means that RBCs break down within the circulation or within the macrophages. Yeah, that is the point to understand, that normally RBCs break down within the macrophages. That is why we say normally old RBCs don't undergo intravascular hemolysis, they go into extravascular hemolysis, actually macrophage, monocyte macrophage system hemolysis. Is that right? Now we'll talk about, let's suppose there is one, let's suppose here is your spleen. Okay. In the spleen we make here we just make one macrophage. This is a large macrophage. And in this macrophage, this is the RBC which this macrophage has recently captured. Right? Now we are going to see how macrophage deals with the RBC and how bilirubin is produced, right? What really happens, that talking about that when a macrophage captures an RBC, what really happens with the RBC and its components, right? Now RBC basically consists of cytoplasm and its cell membrane. That's the major thing. And of course within the cytoplasm of RBC there is a lot of hemoglobin. Is that right? Let's see by the breakdown of the important component of RBC what we really get. Right? RBCs are broken down, number one, into membranes and their breakdown products. Number two, different types of cytosolic proteins and enzymes. Right? And then of course you should not forget there is hemoglobin. Is that right? Membranes, break down into, yes, lipids and proteins. Lipids will go eventually into free fatty acids and proteins will break down into amino acids, and these substances can be utilized by macrophage for its own purposes. Right? So membranes are gone with the wind. They are finished. We are left with the proteins. What will happen with the proteins? Proteins will be also broken down into, yes, amino acids. And that story is also over. Now you are left with what? Hemoglobin. First of all, we should see what is the normal structure of hemoglobin. And then we'll see once it breaks down what really comes out. Let me tell you here what is the normal structure of hemoglobin. Is that right? Normal structure of hemoglobin, when we are talking about, basically, this is a pyrrole ring. The single ring is called pyrrole ring. And if 4 pyrrole rings are put together, right? When 4 pyrrole rings are put together, this structure is called protoporphyrin. What is it? Protoporphyrin. This is pyrrole ring. So when hemoglobin synthesis starts, first we have to synthesize heme. And then we have to fuse the heme with the globin chain. And we end up with the hemoglobin. So what really happens in a hemoglobin synthesis, first of all we should synthesize pyrrole ring. Erythroblast synthesizes pyrrole ring. Then pyrrole rings are put together to synthesize protoporphyrin. Then what really happens, that within the protoporphyrin, let's suppose I show protoporphyrin like this flower. Now of course these petals are pyrrole rings. In the protoporphyrin, if you put the iron, what you put? Iron. Now the structure is called, yes, heme. What is the structure? heme. And then what really happens that let's suppose this is heme and here is iron. With that, if you bind a globin chain which should be made of what? Amino acids. Then this structure is called hemoglobin. What is this called? Hemoglobin. One heme with one globin is hemoglobin monomer. What is the structure? Hemoglobin monomer. Let's recap. Attention please. You start from the top. Pyrrole ring fuse with each other make protoporphyrin. Protoporphyrin incorporated with iron becomes heme. Heme fused with globin chain is called hemoglobin. Is that clear to everyone? Right now. This is hemoglobin monomer. Normally a full molecule of hemoglobin is a tetramer. How it is tetramer? Let me tell you. What really happens that let's suppose these are 4 what is this? Protoporphyrins, and all of them are having iron, so they are 4 heme. And let's suppose here is alpha globin chain, here is also alpha globin chain, and here is let's suppose beta globin chain, and there is also beta globin chain. Now this whole structure is one hemoglobin tetramer. One hemoglobin tetramer. You must be knowing such kind of hemoglobin is called hemoglobin A, which is having 2 alpha chains plus 2 beta chains. In the same way, in place of beta chain, if you bring the gamma chains, it becomes hemoglobin F. And if there is delta chain, it becomes hemoglobin A2. Right? So anyway, now you know what is the basic structure of hemoglobin. Let's suppose we make a hemoglobin here. Right? Now, of course, this hemoglobin should be what? It should be having iron, and it should be having, what is this structure? Protoporphyrin. And with the protoporphyrin, normally it should have, what is this? Iron. So what is it? Heme. With the heme, if this is the globin chain, then what is this? Hemoglobin. Now what really happens? First of all, enzymes break down, what is this? Globin chain. When a globin chain will break down, it will also become the part of amino acid pool. It will also become the part of amino acid pool. After that, what is we are left with? Globin has gone. We are left with the heme, isn't it? With iron and other structure, remaining structure, we are left with the heme. Now what really happens? The next step is that enzymes will break down and bring the iron out. Now this iron which has been brought out, let's suppose this is iron. This iron is highly toxic molecule, and it will react with the different substances in the cell. It may damage the cell. So this iron should be put into a proper container. The container is that there is a special type of protein which is synthesized by the most of the cells which handle the iron. That protein is called, yes, what is the protein which handles iron? Apoferritin. This is apoferritin. Now what really happens? Apoferritin and iron fuses together, and when both of them fuse together, they convert into a structure, and this structure is called ferritin. So what is this structure? Ferritin. Now, when many ferritins are put together, let's suppose we put many ferritin put together and make a polymer of ferritin. There is a polymer of ferritin, and this polymer of ferritin, right, this is called, yes please, very good, excellent, this is called hemosiderin. Okay, by the way, before we really go into detail of jaundice, what is the difference in hemosiderosis and hemochromatosis? Who will explain? Have you heard of these terms? Hemochromatosis and hemosiderosis, or never heard? You heard of it. So, Dr. Rafiq, would you like to tell? What is the difference between the hemosiderosis and hemochromatosis? Okay, write it down. Everyone has some normal amount of hemosiderin in the body. Iron is basically kept into storage form, and the storage form of iron in our body is mainly hemosiderin. When storage form of the iron become more than normal, but yet it is not damaging the tissue, it is called hemosiderosis. When hemosiderin become more than normal, but it has yet not started damaging the tissue significantly. This is called hemosiderosis. But if hemosiderin level further become high and start damaging the tissue, then we call the condition hemochromatosis. So what is hemochromatosis? Hemochromatosis is a condition in which hemosiderin level is so high in the body that tissues are being damaged. For example, liver will be damaged in hemosiderosis, pancreas will be damaged in hemosiderosis, your spleen will be enlarged, or maybe your heart, that may be damaged by hemosiderosis, that may produce some right. Then the hemosiderosis may damage interior pituitary, this may damage many tissues in the body. So what I'm talking about, that hemosiderosis means simply high level of iron storage form, but yet not has started damaging the tissues. But if it has started damaging the tissues, then it should be called hemochromatosis. Now let's come back. We have solved the problem of the membranes, we have solved the problem of cytosolic proteins, now we are dealing with the problems of hemoglobin. That hemoglobin was divided into globin and heme, and globin was further divided into amino acids. Then we were left with the heme. This heme was divided into iron and the leftover material. The leftover material is, what is this material? Yes, please. Yeah? This is not protoporphyrin, that is a ring structure, my brother. So what should it be? This is bilirubin. So this is how you produce the bilirubin in your body. From where the bilirubin comes, right? That is breakdown product of hemoglobin and other hemoproteins in the body. Is that right? So it is not protoporphyrin. If it was protoporphyrin, it could be recycled, right? It is not protoporphyrin. It's a broken protoporphyrin, modified protoporphyrin. It is a wasted protoporphyrin. It's a toxic protoporphyrin. It is actually not protoporphyrin. It is bilirubin. Is that right? And this bilirubin, right, what were the enzymes on the way which handled with it? First of all, actually, it was made biliverdin. The first compound which is made is biliverdin. Then it goes one step more, and then it converts into, bilirubin. Now, the enzymes which are involved in this game, number one, heme is first of all converted, heme, it was here, converted into this form, biliverdin. The enzyme which is involved here is, which enzyme is here? What is the name of this enzyme? This is called heme oxygenase. What is the name of this enzyme? Heme oxygenase. So what is heme oxygenase? This basically break down the heme into biliverdin and iron. Iron is later on incorporated with apoferritin, becomes ferritin, and ferritin converted into hemosiderin. Is that right? Then what is there? Biliverdin. Biliverdin is acted upon by one more enzyme. This is acted upon by one more enzyme. And what is the name of this enzyme? Yes. What is the name of this enzyme? Mr. Abid must tell. Right, but it's not that simple, my friend. This is called biliverdin reductase. What is the name of this enzyme? The name of this enzyme is biliverdin reductase. Biliverdin reductase. Right? And now, it is a reduced form. When biliverdin is reduced, it becomes bilirubin. Now, this bilirubin will come out of, from where it will come out? Macrophages. Wherever they are. Wherever macrophages, they may be in the spleen most abundantly, or they may be present in the liver, or they may be present in the, you can say, bone marrow. So what really happens, that macrophages take up the RBCs and they release the bilirubin. Now you are clear that if somewhere it is written that macrophages take up the RBCs and release the bilirubin, you know what are the steps and what is really happening within the macrophages. Now we have to deal, this bilirubin is a highly toxic molecule. It's a dangerous molecule. It is constantly being produced in our body, and our body must get rid of it. So we'll talk about how we really get rid of this molecule. I told you that daily we produce how much bilirubin? 0.2 to 0.3 grams per day. How much bilirubin is daily produced? 0.2 to 0.3 grams per day. So somehow body should get rid of it, and during the process of getting rid of the substance, body should have some special precautions not to injure itself. Let's see that matter, how body deals with it. We're going to talk about physiology of bilirubin first, and then we'll talk about pathology, right, and related therapeutic aspects and investigations. So we were talking about that, let's suppose here is spleen and this is a macrophage, and this macrophage has taken up one RBC. It's going to degrade the components of RBCs into simpler compounds. As we know that membranes of the RBCs will degrade into protein and lipids, and proteins will eventually degrade into amino acids. Lipids will break down to free fatty acids and other simple lipids, and proteins which are from other enzymes. You know, RBCs have a lot of enzymes. Do you know any enzyme in RBC? Yeah, any other enzyme you know? Pyruvate kinase, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. There are anemias related with these two enzymes. When there is deficiency of pyruvate kinase or glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, patient may become anemic. Is that right? These are the minimum two enzymes you are supposed to know about RBCs. And of course then there are other structural proteins like ankyrin and spectrin, which are specially stabilizing the membrane of the RBCs. Anyway, all these enzymic proteins and structural proteins, they will break down into simple amino acids, right? Then what really happens, we are left with the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin will be broken into heme and globin, and again you know that globin will degrade into amino acids. Now we are left with heme. Out of heme, iron is extracted out, right? And iron is fused with apoferritin, and iron with apoferritin makes a monomer of ferritin, and multiple ferritin molecules fuse together to make a polymer which is called hemosiderin. Now we are left with the remaining component of heme, which has actually this structure, and this structure is called, yes please, this is called, initially it is converted into biliverdin, and eventually it is converted into, yes, bilirubin. And this bilirubin is pushed out into, yes, circulation. So this is a bilirubin which we have to deal with. Now this is very important bilirubin. What is the important point about it? This bilirubin, number one. First point which we have to talk about this bilirubin, that it's highly toxic molecule. And because this bilirubin is a highly toxic molecule, we have to get it out of the body, but in a safe manner. And once bilirubin is released from the mononuclear cell into circulation, we should trap it into circulation so that it does not leak back into other tissues. The first principle is that if mononuclear cells are releasing this bilirubin into circulation, we should trap this molecule into circulation so that it does not diffuse into many other tissues back to the body, because if this is held and trapped into circulation, then sooner or later it will pass by the liver, where liver will handle it. But what is the way to keep and trapped into circulation? Answer is, it's a small molecule. It has a tendency to leak out. So there are special bilirubin trapping proteins which are again synthesized by liver. Let's come, this is the liver. Here's the hepatocytes. I've drawn just two hepatocytes. This is biliary drainage system. You know, hepatocytes have one face. It's a very simple functional diagram. If we talk about this hepatocyte, this face of the hepatocyte is towards the blood side, and this face of the hepatocyte is towards, yeah, biliary system, right? It means the hepatocytes have basically two important faces. Number one, some part of the membrane of the hepatocyte face to each other, and one part of the hepatocyte membrane should be facing towards the space of disc and sinusoidal face, and this side of the face of the hepatocyte should be towards the, yes, biliary canalicular face. So it is just like that. There's a front road and there's a back road, right? So front road, what is moving here? Blood. In the back road, there's a drainage system, right? What is this drainage system? Yes, biliary system. Every hepatocyte has a front face, right, and it has a back face. In the front face, it is facing with the circulation. In the back face, it is facing with the biliary canalicular system. And remember one very important thing, that functional characteristics of this part of the membrane is very different than functional characteristics of this part of the membrane. As we'll go into detail, we'll talk in reference to bilirubin. Right now what I wanted to tell you, that one of the function of hepatocyte is that it will secrete special type of, you can say, proteins, and these proteins will go into circulation. And once these proteins go into circulation, one of the major functions of these protein is that they will immediate, as soon as bilirubin comes out, these protein will bind with bilirubin. That is why these proteins are called bilirubin binding proteins. They are part of the protein which are released by the hepatocytes daily into circulation. So we can say that this is the duty of a hepatocyte to provide the circulatory system with such proteins which are bilirubin trappers. Right? Once this bilirubin binds with this plasma protein, what really happens? That now the whole complex becomes very large. When this complex becomes very large, do you think this bilirubin can go back to the tissues? No. Okay. Can now this bilirubin, which is bound with the plasma proteins, right? Can this bilirubin filter out here and appear into urine? Answer is no, because normally proteins don't filter out. If proteins are not going into filtrate, how protein bound substances will go into filtrate? So it means this newly released bilirubin immediately bind with the bilirubin binding proteins, and after that rest of the body will become safe from it. Now this bilirubin, after binding with the protein, has developed two properties. Property number one is it cannot diffuse through microcirculation back to your many tissues. Property number two is it is unable to filter into urine. So it means this form of bilirubin will not produce bilirubinuria. If you find bilirubin in anyone's urine, be sure that bilirubin will not be this form, because this form is fused with proteins, and normally proteins don't filtrate in heavy amount. So protein bound bilirubin also does not. This type of bilirubin is called, first listen question. I know you are in hurry in answer, but still I will put a question in a decent way. You are a respectable lady. So this bilirubin molecule, once it is bound with the plasma protein, what type of bilirubin is this? Yes, please. Conjugated or unconjugated?
Conjugated.
It is conjugated bilirubin according to Dr. Tanzila. What about Dr. Amtal? It is unconjugated. Okay, then these ladies have to fight with each other, it means. One lady is saying this is conjugated bilirubin. Other lady says it is unconjugated bilirubin. How would you prove your point? How you will prove she is wrong?
It's yet to pass through the liver to become conjugated.
Yes, she is right. Because bilirubin gets conjugated within the liver, within the hepatocyte, and it has not yet gone to hepatocytes. Listen. Conjugated bilirubin does not mean that bilirubin fused with anything is conjugated. The term of conjugated bilirubin is used when bilirubin binds with glucuronic acid. When bilirubin is fused with glucuronic acid, then we say bilirubin is conjugated. And plasma proteins are not glucuronic acids, right? So when plasma protein bind with this bilirubin, newly released bilirubin, it is yet not fused with glucuronic acid. So it must be considered unconjugated plasma protein bound bilirubin. Is that right? Here there is one very important technical point. So I think just to remind you for next, we will correct this. We should write it unconjugated, yes, bilirubin. Unconjugated bilirubin, right? So when bilirubin released, it is unconjugated bilirubin. Initially it is free unconjugated bilirubin, then it is plasma protein bound unconjugated bilirubin. Here is a very important point. Especially in the gynae of ward, doctors are very concerned that if newborn produces excessive amount of unconjugated bilirubin, they say there is increased risk of leakage of unconjugated bilirubin to the central nervous system and may produce a problem called kernicterus. That is called kernicterus. What is kernicterus? If bilirubin goes into heavy amount in central nervous system, of course not only it will morphologically impart a yellow color to the cerebral cortex and the basal ganglia, but actually it will damage them as well. It's a toxic to the central nervous system neurons, and that may lead to mental, if baby really survives, right? Then baby may develop clinical features related with mental retardation. Along with that, when damages to the basal ganglia, there may be motor dysfunctions as well. My question is this, that if unconjugated bilirubin is bound with the plasma protein, can plasma protein bound unconjugated bilirubin leak into central nervous system? What about blood-brain barrier?
It would not leak.
It should not,
Yes.
but it will. I will talk about how. First of all, look, plasma brain, in the brain, the circulatory system, right, it is very tight in a way that in central nervous system, the capillaries which are passing through the central nervous system, their endothelial cells are stitched to each other very tightly, plus the astrocytes on the outside, and there is something called blood-brain barrier. Well, it is not really a true physical barrier. Blood-brain barrier means everything which is present in the blood is not going to spill into interstitial microenvironment of central nervous system in which neurons work up, right? Only smaller molecular things or highly lipid soluble things can move from the blood to the microenvironment of central nervous system. Is that clear? Now, our question goes back that why in newborn, if unconjugated bilirubin level is pathologically high, then there is a great risk that unconjugated bilirubin will go to the central nervous system. How would you answer to this question?
The blood-brain barrier is not that developed.
Okay, number one reason is that in the newborn, blood-brain barrier is not so well developed, and number two reason is more important. What is that? That as unconjugated bilirubin level goes high in the blood, there is a shortage of these proteins, and as unconjugated bilirubin level goes high and high, all the trappers of unconjugated bilirubin will become saturated, especially in the newborn, which are the limited supply of bilirubin binding proteins. So what really happens, that the fraction of unconjugated bilirubin which is not bound to plasma protein progressively increases, and that is which can flood into circulation, central nervous system microenvironment, and produce toxicity to the central nervous system. Okay, then what you will do for these kids? If there is a kid which is having very high, you can say, unconjugated bilirubin, and you are very much worried about that baby may not go into problems of canalicular, what will you do about this baby?
We could do an exchange blood transfusion.
Okay, one way is exchange blood transfusion in a very advanced stage. Excellent. What else you can do?
Phototherapy.
Phototherapy. You will show the photo of mother or father to the baby. Yeah. What is phototherapy? What is phototherapy? You know phototherapy?
Yeah, the light, there is special kind of light, blue ultraviolet light.
Okay, there's special type of light. We expose the baby to that for a long time, and then what will happen? The baby's color look less yellow in that light, or there's some other reason?
Some other reason.
What is that?
Bilirubin started passing out.
Rapidly out of the body. Why? Because that particular light makes the unconjugated bilirubin into special photoisomers. Special photoisomer which do not need to be conjugated by liver and can pass out. Because newborn's liver is also, you can say, relatively immature and not well equipped with all the enzymes and the concentration to handle with the flood of the unconjugated bilirubin. Is that right? Am I clear? Okay, another thing they have recently started, there's another thing what they have started giving to the babies is 10-protoporphyrin. What is this 10-protoporphyrin? There's something coming in the 10. This 10-protoporphyrin. What is 10-protoporphyrin? They have started as a therapy of the babies who have the risk of canalicular. Yes, it is write it down please. It is synthetic metalloprotoporphyrin. It is synthetic metalloprotoporphyrin. It is 10-protoporphyrin. It is a synthetic metalloprotoporphyrin. It is a potent competitive inhibitors of hemoxygenase. It is a powerful inhibitor of hemoxygenase. And now look here, if there is a newborn baby and you have given him 10-protoporphyrin, and 10-protoporphyrin goes into macrophages and inhibits the hemoxygenases, then power of the hemoxygenases to produce biliverdin and eventually bilirubin has been reduced. So in this way, when we give 10-protoporphyrin to the newborn baby, we reduce the rate of production of unconjugated bilirubin. At the same time, we expose them to the special wavelength of the light, so that whatever unconjugated bilirubin is already produced, this should rapidly convert into such photoisomers which can be expelled out of the body very rapidly without depending on the conjugative process of the liver. Okay, let's go ahead. So we were talking about this is unconjugated bilirubin, which is bound with the plasma protein. Normally it cannot enter into central nervous system, even it cannot go to many other tissues. It cannot filter into urine, so and it is highly toxic but trapped. Highly toxic but trapped. Now what really happens? That I told you, these substances were produced by liver, and then they are going and binding this. Once this becomes fully loaded, once plasma protein, bilirubin binding pre-albumin and bilirubin binding albumin, they're fully loaded, they will take this bilirubin through the circulation. Of course, his hepatic artery and portal vein are still going to the liver, right? And from general circulation, these unconjugated bilirubin along with the plasma proteins through the hepatic artery or through the portal circulation, they will go to the liver. You know, hepatic artery blood and portal circulation, vein blood mix with each other in the hepatic sinusoids. So eventually this will be taken to the hepatic sinusoids. When these are passing by the hepatic sinusoid, this was what? Yes, unconjugated bilirubin. As along with the plasma protein, as they are passing by this, there is a very special type of molecule which is present over here, and it will love to bind. Yes, it will love to bind what?
Conjugated bilirubin.
There is a special receptor and uptake mechanism which is present on the sinusoidal face of the hepatocyte, right? As soon as unconjugated bilirubin along with the plasma protein come near to it, it will transfer this bilirubin into, yes, hepatocytes. So hepatic uptake has been done. And here you must know there are few things which interfere with the hepatic uptake. Can you tell me some substance which can interfere with the hepatic uptake? Any substance you have ever heard of it? There are many drugs which bind here and reduce the hepatic uptake. Okay, from the drugs I remember, some drugs can displace the bilirubin from this point. Some drugs can interfere with the bilirubin handling here, uptake. Some drugs may impair the conjugation of the bilirubin. Some drugs may impair the secretion of bilirubin. Now, you have to tell me few drugs which can displace the, what is this? You have to tell me few drugs which can displace the unconjugated bilirubin from plasma protein, and at least one drug which does not allow the uptake of it or interferes with the uptake. Yeah, do you know any drug which will displace it because clinically important? Because if you are giving those drugs to a person who is jaundice, for one or the other reason you are giving those drugs, bilirubin level will go up, free bilirubin. Especially if you give those drugs to babies, right, newborn babies, you give those drugs, unconjugated bilirubin will be displaced, and now you know where it is headed for, to the central nervous system. Is that right? Do you know any drug like that? At least one drug which may be used for one or the other reason in the newborn even? Yeah. Why don't you tell me sulfonamides? Write it down, please. These are the displacers of unconjugated bilirubin from plasma proteins. Displacers of unconjugated bilirubin from the plasma proteins. The drug which displace bilirubin from this side, especially in the newborn, they increase the risk of canalicular. Good doctors should know the name of those drugs. Sulfonamides, you know, in newborns sometimes there are infections and we have a tendency to use sulfonamides. Be careful. Sulfonamides in the newborn, especially we use for which purpose? For which purpose we use sulfonamides? Please tell me. Meningitis. Have you heard of it? Neonatal meningitis. Then penicillin derivatives. Sometimes if you are giving some babies heavy amount of penicillins for some other reason, but derivatives of penicillin may displace the unconjugated bilirubin from the plasma protein and produce trouble to the person. Then of course, not in babies but in adult people, even furosemide and radiographic contrast material can also displace the bilirubin from the bilirubin binding proteins. Anyway, once bilirubin has been in the bound form, has been taken to the liver circulation, and from the sinusoidal side, it will go to space of Disc, and from there it should be taken up into hepatocyte. There's some drugs which interfere at this point. At least one drug you must tell me, because these drugs will produce unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. The classical drug here is, I will give you an idea. That drug is usually used in anti-tuberculosis therapy. Then another thing I will tell you about that drug. Yes, that produces your all secretions orange color. Even ladies' lens will become orange color. Rifampicin. You remember it from ladies' lens, isn't it?
Red secretion.
Yeah, all the secretions will become pink, not truly red, right? Patient will sweat pink. He will have the truly pinkish, bloody type of what these tears. Even saliva will become pink, and even after taking rifampicin, your lens, which lens? Artificial lens, right? They may become permanently stained pink color, right? So that also rifampicin loves to bind here, and it reduces the uptake of bilirubin sometimes in some patients. Clear? Anyway, let's go ahead. Once bilirubin has gone in, this is conjugated or unconjugated bilirubin?
Unconjugated.
It is unconjugated bilirubin. It has come in. It will enter into endoplasmic reticulum. It will enter into a endoplasmic reticulum. It will enter into endoplasmic reticulum, and within the endoplasmic reticulum there is a very important enzyme, and name of this enzyme is, yes, what is the name of this enzyme? Glucuronide transferase. Now I want to highlight one thing. Look, to get this bilirubin out of the body, we have to make it more polar. We have to make it more polar. We have to make it more charged, so that it becomes water soluble and it is no more lipid soluble. Now, when you want to make a substance more polar or less lipid soluble or more water soluble, one way to do so is that make the substance more charged, right? And one way to make a substance more charged is that you take the substance to the liver, hepatocytes, and hepatocytes produce highly charged molecule. For example, hepatocyte convert glucose into gluconic acid, into glucaric acid, and that into glucuronic acid. What hepatocytes are doing? Hepatocytes are able to convert glucose into glucuronic acid. Glucuronic acid is a highly polar compound, right? Then hepatocytes, once they synthesize the glucuronic acid, they are having a special enzyme which is called UDP, glucuronide transferase, right? You just call it GT. GT is glucuronide transferase. So this is our enzyme which should be called glucuronide transferase. Is that right? Now this glucuronide transferase, this enzyme is normally abundantly present in the liver, especially in the endoplasmic reticulum, and its duty is that it will fuse the glucuronic acid with unconjugated bilirubin, and now bilirubin become conjugated with glucuronic acid. Now bilirubin should be called conjugated bilirubin. So this unconjugated bilirubin is now, what is happening to this? It is fused with, yeah, glucuronic acid, and after it is bound with the glucuronic acid, we call it, yes, conjugated bilirubin. This is now conjugated bilirubin. Now it is called conjugated bilirubin. Now this conjugated bilirubin, okay, I'll make it black. Some people like the black things too much. This is now conjugated bilirubin, right? This conjugated bilirubin is it is conjugated with glucuronic acid, so this is highly what? Polar. Once it is polar, can it dissolve into lipid membrane of hepatocyte? No. So it means now conjugated bilirubin is trapped within the hepatocytes. Now it is trapped within the hepatocyte. If it is trapped within the hepatocyte, now it is up to the hepatocyte, attention please, that hepatocyte will throw it to the blood or to the biliary canalicular system. Now it is up to hepatocyte. Actually hepatocytes have already planted, in the honor of this molecule, special type of transporters, yeah, on which side? These are active transporters, and these special transporting molecules which are present on the canalicular canalicular face of hepatocyte, they are expressed over there. They are capable of catching the conjugated bilirubin from the hepatocytes and expel into where? Biliary canaliculus. So they are responsible, these pumps, they will throw it into biliary canalicular system, and this conjugated bilirubin has now gone into the system, as I showed you that this was the pump system, and this pump system is actively transporting the conjugated bilirubin from intrahepatic site to the biliary canalicular system. Now, this bilirubin, which is now conjugated bilirubin, it will pass through the biliary drainage system. There is no fun in telling that there is biliary canalicular system which go into biliary ductules, then there is right hepatic duct, there is left hepatic duct, they fuse together, make a common hepatic duct, and of course bile also comes to gallbladder, where what major thing happens to bile in the gallbladder? Yes, what gallbladder is doing with the bile? Number one, concentrating, right, and many other things as well. But anyway, it will come here for the storage and concentrating. Eventually, bile along with conjugated bilirubin, of course, with the conjugated bilirubin, bile will have bile salts and acids. What are bile acids? Can you name bile salts or bile acids? Cholic acid and chenodeoxycholic acid. Deoxycholic acid and chenodeoxycholic acid. They are fused with taurine and other amino acids to convert into salt. Anyway, bile salt and bile acids along with the conjugated bilirubin, along with cholesterol and lecithins, they, of course, many other inorganic material as well, especially bicarb, they are taken down through biliary system. In this way, conjugated bilirubin is now headed towards your, yes, to your GIT eventually. The final destination is your GIT. From here, conjugated bilirubin will come over, yeah, this is conjugated bilirubin. It has been released to GIT. Of course, this point is called ampulla of Vater, and it is having a sphincter which is called sphincter of Oddi. Once the conjugated bilirubin comes here, once the conjugated bilirubin comes to the GIT, now eventually what will happen to this conjugated bilirubin? It will undergo further modifications. There are a lot of enzymes which are present in GIT plus a lot of microbes which are present in your GIT, right? And this conjugated bilirubin as it is passing through GIT, it is acted upon by bacteria and enzymes, different bacteria and different enzymes, and they may convert this conjugated bilirubin into another compound which is called urobilinogen. What is it called? Urobilinogen. Now listen, you know, from GIT the portal blood is taking some absorbed material to the liver, right? Now what really happens, you know, portal blood take a lot of blood, you know, from the GIT, and this blood is going to the liver, and of course portal blood also passes, from where it passes? Portal blood is going to the liver and eventually drain into sinusoidal system and right? Now what really happens there? Actually this urobilinogen, right? This is a small part of that is taken up by, yes, taken up by GIT. It is reabsorbed, small part. But major part is more destined to the last part of the gut, where it will convert into, yes, stercobilinogen, and eventually it will pass into fecal matter, and this stercobilinogen is responsible to giving a characteristic yellowish brown color to the fecal matter normally. Is that right? Stercobilinogen. But the urobilinogen, which has been absorbed from here, right, it will pass through the portal circulation, and as portal circulation will be passing through the hepatocyte, part of urobilinogen may be taken up by again sinusoidal side of the hepatocytes and recycled from here. Right? But real problem is that a very small percentage of it may escape into urobilinogen into circulation. This urobilinogen, it is a polar compound and it does not bind with the plasma protein, it is a charged compound. So this urobilinogen, it's a polar compound but not bound with the plasma protein. Because it is not bound with the plasma protein, it will easily filter into urine. And because it is, what is it? It is polar, it cannot dissolve into nephrons, epithelial cells, so it cannot come back. So this urobilinogen is headed to be part of your urinary output. So in this way, every normal person should pass at least small amount of urobilinogen in urine. Is that clear? Any question here? Now, this finding should tell you one thing. If a patient comes to you and patient is having jaundice, if you take the urine of the patient and with dipstick you check, is urobilinogen there or not? If urobilinogen is not there, if urobilinogen is not into urine, it means it is not present in the blood. If it is not present in the blood, it means it was not present in GIT. If urobilinogen was not present in GIT, it means conjugated bilirubin never came here. It means, where is the problem? Outflow. If your blood has lot of conjugated bilirubin, listen now carefully. If someone has hyperbilirubinemia, a lot of conjugated bilirubin is spilling into blood, but there is no urobilinogen into urine, it means problem is somewhere between this point to this point. So it's very simple that whenever a patient comes with conjugated hyperbilirubinemia and you just check with dipstick and there is no urobilinogen, you must think there is some cholestatic problem, there is some bile outflow problem, right? Now, what I was talking about, that this urobilinogen which was retained within here, it may convert into stercobilinogen which will be passed into fecal matter, and if fecal matter is left into open air, oxygen will react with that and convert stercobilinogen into stercobilin, which is more darker color, right?